Hey, I'm Colleen, and this is my summer TBR. Hi, what's up? If you're new to my channel, I'm Colleen, and I talk about books and writing. If those sounds like things you're into, hit the subscribe button, follow along. Today, I'm going to talk about my TBR for the rest of the summer in the genres of fantasy, classic, historical fiction, mystery, and contemporary fiction. Let's go ahead and start with my classics. I made a big classics TBR for the year, and I'm doing okay on it. So I'll link in the description my original video of all the classics I was going to read. Plus I wanted to read a bunch of Shakespeare, and I would say I'm only probably at like 30 to 40% done where I wanted to be, and we are halfway done with the year, so I probably won't get to everything, but I'm making a good effort. So the first book on my classics TBR that I do want to read this summer is My Antonia by Willa Cather. This is a pioneer story, and it's really quick. It's like under 300 pages, so I feel like it's a good book for me to burn through this summer. I did read the first couple pages a few days ago, and I like the writing so far, so I think it'll be a fun read to get to this summer. Next, I've got The House of Spirits by Isabel Allende, and I don't know much about this book other than people have told me I would love it. I know it's like a family saga, and I really like family sagas, and that there's some magical realism in it, which is one of my favorites. Also, it starts with a Pablo Neruda quote, which he's one of my favorite poets, so I'm sure I'm gonna love this book. It's a little longer. It's hard, I'm not going anywhere this summer. I don't have a long plane flight or a day alone on the beach, which I never have, to just sort of pour through some books. So I'm hoping I get to this one at some point this summer, just because I think I will really, really love it. And it's hard. There's so many books on this TBR. What am I going to do? I have so many books to read. My last classic is a chunker, and it's The Aeneid by Virgil. So this I've been wanting to read for a really long time. I've owned this book for over 15 years, and it's so pretty, and I really want to read it. And I know I love The Aeneid because I love tragic love stories, and so I know all about Dido. One of my good friends teaches, she's a classics professor, and she told me different books she knows I will absolutely love. So I'm looking forward to it. Let's see. This is about, it's just a little bit over 300 pages, but I assume it's somewhat dense to read, but it's written in the epic form, so it's verse. So I really want to start this one in July, and this might be a book, honestly, that it takes me 5 months to read, that I just read a couple of the chapters every month rather than sit down and read it through. But either way, when I do my wrap up of 2022, I want to say I've read The Aeneid. So next we'll move into fantasy, which has the most books of any section. And the first one is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, which I've continually put on my TBR every month for the last 4 months. And I've just been putting it off because I do think it's going to emotionally destroy me. And I do love being emotionally destroyed. I love it. But I just haven't had one of those days where I'm I want to read a book the next 2 to 3 days that's going to emotionally destroy me. So hopefully any day now I'll get in that mood, and I'll read this retelling of the love story of Achilles and Patroclus, and I'll be super excited about it. Next, I've got The Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakraborty, and this is the second book in the Daevabad series, I think is how you pronounce it. City of Brass is the first one. I read that last July, and I loved it, so I thought it might be kind of fun to read this one this July. I'm just opening the book to show you the maps because I love her maps. So that's the world that we are in, and it's kind of like a high fantasy set in, and then this map's really cool. That's a city map, which is awesome. So this is a high fantasy with Jinn, and in City of Brass, we start in Cairo, but then we end up being in this other realm where magical creatures exist. There's a lot of political intrigue in it. Honestly, I was thinking before I start this, I should probably read a recap of the City of Brass because it's been, a full year since I read it, just to sort of refresh my brain. I remember the main character is Nari, and she has kind of a big event happen at the end of the first book, and it ended with such a great last line. And then Ali is the other narrator, and he's more involved in the politics of these cities and the power struggles between different kinds of magical creatures. This is also a nice, big, thick book, which I did tell myself in July I was going to read only thick books. And now that July is almost here, I'm oh my God, why did I tell myself that? Speaking of thick books, I've got The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I feel like I'm so late to the party on this, but one of my best friends told me I would love it, so I need to read it. I know it's about a woman who makes some sort of deal with like the devil or a demon that she sort of lives forever, but that no one remembers her, and then one day someone remembers her, which sounds like it's got the makings for a very tragic love story, which is totally my cup of tea. And lastly, I've got When Women Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhill, and I'm on page 162 of this. And honestly, this book's been really, really slow. I've been reading this book since mid-May, so it's been like 6 weeks. I keep reading a couple chapters, putting it down to read another book, reading a couple chapters, putting it down to read another book. Currently, right now, I'm reading, I think, 4 or 5 books, so I'm not being like a good reader right now. Nothing's grabbing me to like fly through and finish it at the moment. But this is about a girl who is like a young teen to mid-teen. We're following her over several years, and she's lived through the mass dragoning of 1955, which is when a bunch of women just like turned into dragons and flew away. The book is a mix of her recollection of the time period, but also like historical and scientific documents talking about women turning into dragons. It's very clearly like an allegory for feminism and sort of like the oppression of the 1950s. I thought the plotline sounded so interesting, and like the cover is so beautiful. I'm not gonna lie, it's the most beautiful cover I've bought this year. But the 1950s are probably my least favorite time period, and that is part of the reason I think I'm having a hard time getting into it. I'm just reading a little bit here and there, but I think I will eventually finish this book. Like, I don't think I'm gonna DNF it, mainly because it's a hardcover. I try really hard not to DNF hardcovers, and I'll see if it picks up, and I'll give you a full review. Hopefully, if I'm being honest, it'll be in my July wrap-up. I'm not going to finish it before then. Okay, so let's move on to mystery. And I actually only have one mystery on my TBR right now, which I might get more from Book of the Month the next 2 months. We'll see. But it's The Murder of Mr. Wickham by Claudia Gray. And I did start this a couple days ago. As I said, I'm in the middle of several books. I'm on page 66, and I'm liking it. So the premise of this is that Mr. Knightley and Emma are having like a house party in which you invite a bunch of people to stay for a month. And they've invited all the main characters from the other books that Jane Austen wrote. So the Tilneys are there with their daughter Juliet from Northanger Abbey. And then the Darcys are there with their son Jonathan from Pride and Prejudice. Fanny and Edmund are there from Mansfield Park. Anne and Wentworth are there from Persuasion, and Marianne and Colonel Brandon are there from Sense and Sensibility. Eleanor's not in this book yet. Maybe she will be, I'm not sure. And they're having a dinner party, and Mr. Wickham comes in a storm and like kind of demands that they let him ride the storm out there. I mean, I assume someone's going to kill him, but everybody there has a connection to him. So obviously the Darcys have their connection to him, but then there's a connection from the Knightleys. Mr. Knightley went to university with him, and the Wentworth, something weird is going on with him and Captain Wentworth. Colonel Brandon sort of knows him. He's kind of like blackmailing Fanny. So they all have these different connections to this character. And I assume he's going to get murdered. And she's setting it up that Juliet, the Tilney's daughter, and Jonathan, the Darcy's son, are probably going to be the ones to solve the murder. They're both like sort of old enough to be married-ish. So I think they're going to have a romance also. I'm liking it. It's definitely written very much in like a Jane Austen tone, which is interesting. I definitely think I'll give this to my mom when I finish it because she loves Jane Austen and I think she'll like reading this book. I also only have one historical fiction on my list, and it's Woman of Light by Kali, I'm going to say her name so wrong. I'm so sorry. Fayardo Anstein, I think. Probably nowhere near it. I'm so sorry. You can look at how it's spelled. There you go. So I got this from Book of the Month, and I know it takes place in the 1930s. It is about generations of a family. I know it's a lot about like dealing with racism in the West. I can't remember exactly where they are. Denver. So they're in Denver in the 1930s. We have our narrator, Luce. And she is a tea leaf reader, which is part of the reason I got into this book because I think that's pretty cool. She's having like visions of the past of like the lands the indigenous people have lost in America. And then she's also dealing with racism in her present life. I'm very excited to read this. I think it'll be a really good read. And the first couple pages, because Book of the Month always gives you the first couple pages, were fantastic. And I really like the writing style of this author. So I'm very much looking forward to it. And then the last book I have is another Book of the Month book. It's a contemporary fiction called The Love of My Life by Rosie Walsh. When I read the description of this, it sounded a little bit like a domestic thriller, even though it's billed as a contemporary romance. But I did read probably the first like 30 pages and didn't realize that this had a cancer plot line, which I was just kind of like, oh, I don't know if I want to read that. And I didn't see it in the trigger warning, but that was probably just me because I don't read the trigger warnings too carefully because I like to be sort of surprised, and there aren't a lot of trigger warnings that are like deal breakers for me. But this is about a woman who is married and has a small child, and she has a cancer diagnosis. She has a secret. She's been keeping a secret from her husband, and I know he's going to find out the secret and feel like he doesn't know her at all. So I would like to read it. I'm going to give it another go this summer and see what I think. If the cancer stuff is too heavy, I might not be able to read it. But either way, if I don't, then I'll give it to one of my neighbors who I think will like it. So that is my very long TBR of books I would like to read this summer. I doubt I'll get to all of them, but hopefully I'll get to like 75% of them. That would be nice. And then have a couple on my September and October TBRs. If you made it this far in the video, throw down a comment of a big stack of books, because don't we all have a big stack of books we'd like to get to this summer? As always, I hope you are in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. See you soon.